Friends, I am Dr. Amdekar, and in this series titled as Choose the Right Test and Interpret Wisely, in this series, the first video discuss about the chest X-ray and USG. Today we know that chest X-ray is good for bones and the general structure of the lungs. However, the lateral film would delineate much better the lobar pathology as well as pick up the retrocardiac or retrosternal mediastinal problems. However, a USG has taken over in terms of diagnosis in pneumonia or a pleural effusion, and it has an advantage of free of radiation. Plus, in children, it's not easy to get the right film in right position in deep inspiration, and therefore USG is a good test for a pneumonia and pleural effusion. However, USG can not really identify very well the retrocardiac or a posterior mediastinal masses, and therefore we know that chest X-ray is routinely used, but USG is as good for the common conditions. However, in the next video, we talked about the CT scan and MRI. Friends, we know that a CT scan is very good for infarction, hemorrhage, or tumors, as well as calcification and bones. And CT scan is commonly used. It's cheaper but has an exposure to radiation. But CT scan also has some limitation, especially when you talk about a CT scan of brain, then the posterior cranial fossa and brainstem problems are not well visualized by CT scan, and therefore you may need an MRI. But an advantage of CT scan is one, that it is little easy to perform, doesn't need sedation. You can have an HRCT, a high resolution, with slices as thin as 1 to 2 millimeters, and then one could use the contrast as well to brighten the inflammatory or highly vascular lesions. But MRI scores over because it has no exposure to radiation but needs sedation in younger children, but it's very good for soft tissue as well as for developmental defects, myelination defects, as well as to differentiate between gray and white matter. And it has an advantage that the T1 and T2 images, for example, and T2 images are good to brighten again the inflammatory disorders. Thus, one may have to choose very wisely between a CT scan and an MRI. And when it comes to head injury, for example, it's mostly MRI, though a CT scan could be considered within few hours of head injury, but not thereafter. So having said about CT and MRI, in the next video, we talked about ECG and echocardiogram. We know that ECG is very good for rhythm disturbances as well as in myocarditis, like in even Kawasaki. You would check for any increased PR or QT interval or the T wave or ST segment abnormalities, and it helps in to that extent. But today, a 2D echocardiogram classically can define the anatomic very clearly, and therefore different types of defects, cardiovascular defects, are well noted with 2D echocardiogram. But even in modern era with availability of an echocardiogram, one still needs an X-ray chest because none of those tests can define very clearly the lung pathology or an airway issues. And then even ECG is required because echocardiogram cannot pick up rhythm disturbances. Thus, we will have to choose very wisely between all these three, though echocardiogram is a usual test to define any defects. In the next video, we talked about EEG and EMG, and we know that EEG is used for a seizure disorder. A focal seizure can be made out by lateralization and also by focal EEG abnormalities. But it's important to note that even normal people may have an abnormal EEG, and 1% of abnormal EEG pattern, epileptic pattern, may not have had a seizure at all. And therefore, one must very wisely interpret these abnormalities, and milder abnormalities may not really signify very well. However, at some time, an EEG may be normal in epilepsy because in an interactal phase, one may miss abnormalities, and therefore one may have to use a sleep deprived EEG or even stimulated EEG like a photic stimulation. And EEG therefore is an important test for a seizure, but we must know when to do it and how wisely to interpret it. About EMG, we are all aware that it differentiates myopathy from neuropathy. In terms of myopathy has a small amplitude, neuropathy has a large amplitude, and better test is an NCV, where any signal, electrical signal that passes through the nerve is well measured and is useful test for neuritis or nerve pathologies. Thereafter, we discuss the pulmonary function test. It's difficult to imply a pulmonary function test in children under 6 years of age, and even older children may find it difficult, or even adults for that matter, and a technician will have to kind of explain and make the patient try it 2-3 times before a final reading is taken. And we are all aware that FEV1 FVC ratio decides between an obstructive and a restrictive pathology, though both may have a low FEV1, but the ratio is normal in restrictive pathologies and disturbed in the obstructive pathology. One could also see the changes with a bronchodilator, whether the bronchospasm is reversible, and this test is not commonly used because asthma is still a clinical diagnosis, but in case of doubt, one could use spirometry, but not the peak flow meter. That is used only for monitoring the further progress and not for diagnosis. Thereafter, in the next video, we discuss the immunological tests. And friends, having discussed the probability of how to choose the right test about many things that we have discussed so far, immune functions become an important part because immune deficiency disorders are getting more and more commonly diagnosed. You start with simple CBC, and we know that the absolute neutrophil count, if it's very low, might suggest a life-threatening situation, especially if ANC is below 500, and this is largely used also while monitoring therapy of a bone marrow infiltrative disorders. ALC low often indicates a probable T cell defect, and of course the T cell functions could be considered by analysis of a subsets of T cells like CD4 helper cells, CD8 cytotoxic cells, and CD38 natural killer cells. But one could use such subsets even for diagnosis like a CD18 for LAD, the leukocyte adhesion defect. And thus the subsets are usually ordered by flow cytometry and has become a routine immunological test. And when it comes to B cell, of course, immunoglobulins like IgG, IgM, IgA, and also we are aware of hyper IgM and hyper IgE syndromes, and that is not difficult to pick up. And then you have a complement problems where you could do CH50 or AH50, and one could consider a specific test for CHD like the NBT test or a DHR test for chronic granulomatous disease. Having said this, even a simple platelet counts would be important because a thrombocytopenia is seen in some of the disorders like CVID or even some of the syndromes. Thereafter, in the next video, we discuss about genetic tests. Friends, genetic tests are very important for hereditary disorders, also considering the carrier states and the risk of such a probability. However, it's most important that you cannot blindly search for a genetic mutation abnormalities, and therefore a clinical diagnosis, at least a group diagnosis of probabilities, is very, very important. And one knows about the chromosomal analysis, like number of chromosomes, as well as whether there is any deletion or duplication or translocation or inversion, and these abnormalities are picked up by karyotyping, whereas one could also assess DNA, RNA in genes. It could be in a single gene or a group of genes, and even a genome. But however, its blind search is not in order. And besides these genetic tests, which can confirm the diagnosis much clearly, we also have a genomic problems, and therefore a tumor may be having a set of mutations, and one could decide even the management problems. And lastly, even a biochemical genetics, like any abnormality in the structure or activity of a protein, can be helpful in diagnosing a genetic disorders like an inborn error of metabolism. In the last part of this series, we discussed the rheumatological tests. And friends, it's important that rheumatological tests are not diagnostic at all, but just supportive, which means that you must have a reasonably correct, a basic clinical diagnosis, which is largely based on the pattern recognition. And then one could consider a more specific test for support. We are all aware that ANA is normal population also is seen, and therefore it's not diagnostic of anything. It doesn't even tell you that you have a disease. Similarly, a dsDNA is far more likely diagnosis of an SLE, but again not 100% true. Having known the limitations of these rheumatological tests, one could also consider a specific test for vasculitis like a C-ANCA or P-ANCA, and therefore one might have to choose the right test. A test like a rheumatoid factor is restricted only in adults, largely in rheumatoid arthritis, but the rarely required for pediatric practice, exception being elderly female children with polyarthritis may have an RF positive. Having seen all this, the emphasis has been that these are the tests which are to be selectively used, chosen rightly, but also interpreted wisely. And I hope you have enjoyed all this series. Having finished large part of symptom science investigation, now we are going to move into the next series of therapy. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about first the principles of therapy. Thank you very much.